like to do that too, right? So Education 10x, let me just introduce the company to you guys a bit and then we can start. So Education 10x, as you know, is the world's financial literacy platform for kids, where we are trying our best and operating in 20 more countries, and we are trying our best to educate children about money and finance. So we are proud of the fact that through our pedagogy and curriculum, we have been able to make so many kids smarter and more responsible with money. So talking about curriculum masterclass sessions, as we are doing that, right? So as key part of our 10x curriculum, we try our best to make the children talk to people who are working in the industry right now and who are working on new things, so that they also get some new things into their mind, right? Because they are the kids, they are the future. So topic for today is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. That is something which is intriguing, not just for kids, but their parents and adults and everyone, right? So parents have a lot of times told us that we want to know more about cryptocurrency. How can we know more about cryptocurrency and all? So today we have partnered up with someone really special in the cryptocurrency industry, and we'll be talking so much about cryptocurrency today. So I would like to introduce Mr. Arjun Vijay. He's the co-founder of Giotus Cryptocurrency Exchange, one of India's leading digital asset trading platform. In his current role, he is responsible for spearheading the business by building strong partnerships and taking care of daily operations at Giotus. So Arjun Vijay is the co-founder and CEO of Giotus, and I think there's no one else in India who can talk better about cryptocurrency with us. So Arjun, hi.
Hi, Kunal. I think it's a bit of an exaggeration to me say that.
Okay, so Arjun, shall I leave the kids to you?
Yeah, sure, Kunal. Happy to take it from here.
Okay.
So you can see the screen?
Yes, it's visible.
Perfect. So, hi guys. I think this very mixed audience. We have some kids, the parents, and even some professionals, I think. So I'll try to ensure that the content reaches all of you guys. I'll try to keep the content, my presentation short, like 30-40 minutes, and post that we'll have some time for questions, right? So if you have any questions, you can keep posting it in the chat window. So once my presentation is over, we can take the questions one by one. Okay, here we go. So I think the perfect question to start this presentation would be, what is Bitcoin, right? So normally when we ask about like what is Bitcoin, when we started our business, we used to talk all tech, right? How we use a Merkle tree, how a transaction is confirmed, and all sorts of things, right? Then we realized if you meet anyone in any person in the world, you ask them what is an internet, they all have a fair understanding of internet, right? Probably they'll not be used understanding what is HTTP, how a TCP/IP, how a packet works, and all those things. But they all understand what an internet is, and their understanding is based on the applications, right? What we use an internet for. Probably they'll say, okay, internet is something that we use to send messages in WhatsApp, do a video call, or do a webinar like this, watch videos on YouTube, order things on e-commerce, right? So mostly our understanding of a product or tech is based on the applications. So if you take Bitcoin, why do we have a Bitcoin? What is the application of Bitcoin? So the first and foremost is it's more like a currency, right? It was created as a replacement or could be potential replacement for money, right? Like a US dollar. It can be a unit of currency. It can be a unit of account, right? A lot of websites already, they accept this digital currency, and even offline retails like Tesla and all those people, they started accepting Bitcoin, right? So you can use it just like money. Today, one Bitcoin is priced around 26 lakh rupees, right? If you want to buy something for 26,000 rupees, you can pay 0.01 Bitcoins, right? It behaves just like Indian rupee or this thing. It's a bit more volatile, but functionally it's similar to a currency. The second thing is, internet is a set of protocols, right? I think students will understand this much better. So protocol is a set of rules based on which something should function, right? For internet to work, we have a HTTP and a TCP protocol. Similarly, this entire concept of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin, this slight confusion, right? The unit, whatever we spend, whatever I hold in my account, like I have 2 Bitcoins. So that is called Bitcoin. The network, right? through which it operates. For example, Indian rupee, we can send it through a NEFT system. It can be sent through an UPI system, the payment rails. So that is also called Bitcoin. And apart from that, the protocol that governs this, so that is also called Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a protocol. It consists of rules which says it what is the amount of Bitcoin that can be sent in a transaction, what is a valid transaction, what is an invalid transaction, who should approve this transaction, how new Bitcoins are generated. Everything is written within the Bitcoin network. There's no external entity who will come and say that, okay, I'll approve this transaction, I'll not approve this transaction. Okay, I want to change the way, I want to shut down this network. So no such things can happen, right? It is a self-governing body. It's like an organism. It's an animal. It has a life of its own, and it's governed by the set of practices, rules. And the most important thing, right? Why Bitcoin was created? Bitcoin was launched in 2009, just after the international crisis, right? We had this Great Depression in 2008, and Bitcoin was kind of a fallout from that. So the problem with current monetary system, what Satoshi Nakamoto thought was, there is like too much of money, right? Governments are printing money like crazy. When I was a kid, I used to ask, why doesn't government print money to solve all its issues, right? Why does government need to tax people, right? They could just print money and do whatever they want. They can pay the salaries, they can build bridges, right? So at that point of time, I was told government cannot print money just like that. They need to have some amount of gold, and only the equivalent of gold they can print, right? Now I realized whatever the story, it used to be true. Before 1970s, this story used to be true. But after 1970, we have something called a fiat currency. Right now, there's nothing stopping government from printing as much currency as they want, right? Almost all the countries across the world, they don't print money based on the gold that they have. It is just the inflation that they're targeting. They're saying, okay, if the prices of the goods are like not increasing too much, I just keep printing money. At some point of time, there is too much liquidity into the system. At that point of time, what I do is I reduce the supply of money, right? They'll increase interest rates and all those things, right? So when we were, our parents and all those people, they keep talking, right? 20 years back, it used to be so cheap. Land used to be so cheap. 30 years back, for 1 rupee, I could eat so much, right? The thing is that fundamentally the land, the gold, or even the food products that we eat, they have remained same, right? 50 years back, people used to eat curd rice. Even now they're using this curd rice. The ingredients are same. The land has remained the same. But why is the price of land appreciating? The reason is the buying power of 1 rupee or even 1 lakh rupee, it keeps on reducing, right? If you take 10 lakh rupees and bury it in the earth, right? After 10 years, you come and dig it up. The worth of 10 lakhs will not be the same. It's going to reduce. So why is this happening? The reason it's happening is supply and demand, right? Every year government prints a lot of money, right? And the amount of goods remains the same. So when there's a huge supply and the demand remains same, right, the buying power of money keeps on depreciating, right? So suddenly if government gives everyone 10 lakh rupees, right? Every citizen of India, they are giving 10 lakh rupees. The value of 1 rupee will reduce drastically. You'll see the goods that were used to be priced 50 rupees are 500 or 5,000 rupees now. Right? You cannot make everyone rich by printing more money. So some economists think money should be scarce. The reason why gold has maintained its value for the over last 5,000, 6,000 years consistently is because gold is scarce. Gold is not created on Earth. Gold is only created in the core of the stars. Right? During a supernova explosion, or you need an extremely high temperature and pressure to create an element like gold. Right? It's created by fusing a lot of other elements, right? You have hydrogen, it creates helium and so on and so forth, right? That gold, whichever was there when the earth was formed 4 billion years ago, that is the only thing that is there, and we are mining that. So because of this limited supply, it is able to retain its value. So the creator of Bitcoin, he thought that this money should not have an infinite supply. People should not be able to create it easily, right? So the total amount of Bitcoin, it's limited to 21 million Bitcoins, right? So every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin being produced becomes half. In the first 4 years, around 10.5 million Bitcoins, close to 1 crore Bitcoins were printed, right? In the next 4 years, 50 lakh Bitcoins were printed, next 25 lakhs, right? So it keeps on reducing. So in 2140, the last 0.00001 Bitcoin, it will be produced. And after that, no more Bitcoins can be produced, right? So Bitcoin is having a finite supply, just like gold. See, actually, this finite supply is guarded by mathematics. It's defined by maths, right? Gold, suddenly you find a technology, how you can extract gold from seawater, or you find an asteroid full of gold, suddenly the supply of gold increases a lot and the price might depreciate, right? Throughout the history, there's something called alchemy. People try to find how to make gold from copper, gold from zinc, and all those things, right? At some point in time, maybe scientists might succeed through fission and fusion. They might create. So the supply of gold need not be limited, right? It's only limited based on our, what to say, scientific improvements. But Bitcoin, it's defined by math. So the absolute supply is limited to 21 million. That means you cannot create any Bitcoin more than that. I'm sure a lot of you will have questions. Why is it so? And what happens when the last Bitcoin is printed? I think we can take that in the questions session, right? The next important thing, Bitcoin is more like a payment network, right? If I have 1 Bitcoin, if Kunal wants to have like 0.5 Bitcoin, all he needs to do is send me an address and I can send this Bitcoin to him, right? So you will see that a lot of shopkeepers in future, they might have these QR codes. Rather than accepting through UPI, they'll be accepting through an Bitcoin network, right? In a credit card or a payment processing, you are paying 2% or 1% as a transaction fee, which you are getting back as reward points. So in Bitcoin, the sender will have to pay the fee and it will be based on the transaction. It's like just like paying a stamp. So you'll be, this is like an open source payment network, like how we have a Visa or a MasterCard, which is like owned by one entity. Like there are, the reason why these payment entities, they charge you a lot, right? They charge 2% per transaction. They don't charge you, they charge the retailer. It's because there's only a handful of payment network companies. There is Visa, MasterCard, Maestro, Diners Club, and recently China has started UnionPay and India has RuPay, right? Because there is like limited number of companies, these people are able to charge a heavy premium. When you have an open source network like this, where anyone can receive or accept or send money, right? You'll see the kind of innovation that's going to happen, right? So as I said before, Bitcoin is similar to email, just like how we are able to communicate just by having someone's address. So if I have Kunal's address, I can just send him any email, right? Similarly, if I have someone's Bitcoin address, I'll be able to send them Bitcoin, right? So it's a just peer-to-peer. I don't have to go through a centralized entity, right? And this network is available 24/7. Right, you have banking shutdown and all those things, right? Even if I have an account number, I may not be able to send it. And even the account numbers, they are restricted within certain geography, right? You cannot directly send someone money in the US, but this is a global network, just like email. And if you have someone's address, you'll be able to send Bitcoin. And next thing is Bitcoin is programmable money. You can add some conditions, right? I can make, like I can send half a Bitcoin to Kunal, but I can ensure that Kunal cannot spend it for next 3 months or 6 months. You can put a time lock, right? You can put certain conditions based on which a transaction is made possible or not, right? We used to hear those stories, right? How there will be 4 robbers, they find a treasure and they say that if only 4 of us come together, they give it to an old woman and they only 4 of them come together, the old man has to give them the treasure. So similarly, for even Bitcoin, the password, you can separate it into 4 pieces, 10 pieces, right? And say that at any point of time, I need 6 out of 10 pieces or 3 out of 7 pieces, right? Only if, it can be any of the 3, but at least 3 pieces are required to open that wallet. So these kind of programs can be done, right? So it's not just like a dumb money. If you have a 10 rupee, you have 10 rupee. You cannot make it smart. I can say that you use it only for this purpose or use it only after 3 months, but you might go and use it immediately. But Bitcoin, it's smart money. You can program a limited amount of instructions, right? Next, at some point in time, we'll also talk about Ethereum. Ethereum has like, it's a complete Turing, this thing. You can do a lot of computation in Ethereum. Bitcoin supports limited programmability. The last and most important thing, Bitcoin is open source, right? The last 20 years, this is like one of the most under, we don't talk a lot about how open source has changed the world, right? Just look at internet. Internet is open source. Everyone has access. In 1990s, Microsoft, how they thought was internet will be called a super highway, Microsoft super highway, and they will be controlling, they'll be the gatekeepers. It will be like a private network. That is how Microsoft was seeing internet as, right? Thankful to the founders of internet and guys like Mark Andreessen who created Netscape Navigator. So the internet kind of became like open, where anyone can create and anyone can consume. So people initially, when they created internet in 1990s, they thought only there'll be certain set of creators, just like TV, how TV is. Some people will be creating, other people will be consuming. So the whole internet, the fundamentals, it got changed, right? And thankfully we have an open system, right? See, even 10, 20 years back, or even now, when you buy a system, right, the operating system alone costs 7,000 to 10,000 rupees, right? You pay Windows, right? But you have a phone that costs 3,000 rupees, right? How is it possible? When the software costs 7,000, the phone itself is costing 3,000. It's because of open source. Android is open source and it's free, right? So because of this, we have smartphone accessibility across India, across the world. Everyone is able to have an access to smartphone, right? Similarly, look at in our schools. When I was studying school, they used to sell the CD called Britannica Encyclopedia, right? Where it has all the data, all the knowledge, and all those things. You can search about anything, and you will find some blurb over there, right? Then Wikipedia came. At that point of time, people commented, like, how do you trust a open source network where anyone can create information and anyone can consume? How do you trust the validity of it? But today, where is Britannica Encyclopedia and where is Wikipedia, right? Now the world's most popular operating system is Linux. Microsoft has gone back and they have started allowing Linux on Windows machines, right? So open source is changing the world we see, and Bitcoin is open source. It's like fundamentally changing the foundation of economy, right? Economy is built on something called money, right? If you're able to innovate in the layer of money, the innovations are going to be like endless. The opportunity is going to be endless. So this is a rough understanding of what Bitcoin is about. I've not talked about how Bitcoin works and all those things. This is just generally, Bitcoin is like an horizontal tech. It could be anything. In hands of different people, it could be different thing, right? You cannot limit like Bitcoin is going to be used only for this. But for understanding purpose, these are the popular way Bitcoin is seen and Bitcoin is used, right? So then the second question I normally get from people is, why do we need this new kind of money, right? We have always used this currency and it seems to work pretty well, right? Why do I suddenly need a new currency, right? But if you look at history of human civilization, as the civilization has evolved, the way we see money, that has also evolved, right? It started with seashells. People used salt as money. The word salary comes from salt, right? Roman soldiers, they were paid in salt because salt used to be such an expensive commodity 2000, 3000 years back, right? So then metal coins came into picture. Then gold became the what to say most popular coin. Then you had a dual standard, both gold and silver, they were used simultaneously, right? At some point of time, people thought this gold is becoming too cumbersome. I'm not able to have a smaller denominations. So people started using paper currencies. This whole paper currency is like a very recent phenomenon. If you go 400 years back, you will not find paper currency across in anywhere across the world, right? 1770s is when first time a paper currency was introduced in US, right? It was called the continental dollars, right? It's an interesting story. You can go and read about it, like how this currency came into picture, why they created it, because they didn't have money to issue gold. They didn't have gold to issue. So they just created this paper out of thin air. They said they will only print $10,000 worth of currency. Within 3 months, they printed another 10,000. And from then on, they have been continuously printing more and more and more money. So even at that point of time, for the next 200 years, gold was used as a backing for this currency, right? There is something called a gold standard. At any point of time, the currency was fixed to a value of gold. They'll say $1 is worth 8 ounces of gold or 4 ounces of gold. They kept on decreasing this amount, but at any point of time, right, it was always there was always currency backed by gold. So in 1944, when World War II was happening, right, all the major Western nations, they came together and they said, okay, it's very difficult for each one to have separate currency. So we'll create the standard. US dollar will be worth X amount of gold and all currencies will be interchangeable to gold, right? And US dollar will be used as the world reserve currency. So this is called Bretton Woods Agreement. It happened in 1944. So from then on, people started using US dollar for all the trades. Even now, if you see all the petrol and everything is denominated in US dollars. So what happened in 1960s is people saw that US is printing a lot of currency, right? They didn't have sufficient gold. So the French president Charles de Gaulle, he sent a truckload of shipload of US dollars and said, give me the gold back, equivalent gold. So he got 1 or 2 shipments. A lot of other countries followed the suit. They started asking for gold. So US realized, okay, people have seen this thing. I cannot keep on printing any more dollars because I'll run out of gold. So in 1971, he said, US dollar is no longer backed by gold. If you give me 100 US dollars, I can only give 100 US dollars back in return. I will not give you any amount of gold. I'm not backing it. So from then on, the last 50 years, from 1971, this currency is called a fiat currency. The word fiat means it's not backed by anything, right? So money has continuously evolved, right? And even in 1970s, 80s, even after this, money mostly existed in physical form. You could see a 100 rupee note or a 500 rupee note, right? Then came the electronic money, the credit cards, the bank accounts, and all those things, right? So today, I think less than 10 or 20% of the money in circulation is actually printed, right? In US, in other Western countries, it's much more lesser, right? The lot of currency in circulation, it just exists as a digits in a database. If someone asks for a 500 crore loan from a bank, they just credit that account to the 500 crore, right? And this money keeps on revolving in the banking system. That company will pay someone through a RTGS or an NEFT transfer, right? That money moves from this bank account to that bank account. Hardly anyone uses it cash these days, right? So all the large banking transactions happen through this thing. So we people ask like, I cannot see Bitcoin. Why should I buy it? It's like totally virtual. Actually, our current currency, even Indian rupee or US dollar, it's mostly virtual, right? Less than 10% is printed. Other 80-90% majority exists as a digits in a database. So what we understand is money has continuously evolved, and Bitcoin could be the next avatar of money. But so far I explained about this evolution, but I have not told why we need Bitcoin, right? So the first and foremost, I already explained that the money that governments print, it keeps on reducing value, right? We need much more reliable version of money, right? So Bitcoin can be that because the supply is limited, right? Second, this money is limited by geography, right? You cannot use US dollar in India, you cannot use Indian rupee in this thing. As world gets more and more globalized and much more flatter, right? We need a common system of money. If you look at movies like Star Wars and all those things, you talk about a common system, right? When trade needs to exist, you need a common system. Right now, what's happening is US dollar is continuously printing more and more and more and more money. You just Google money issued in US, right? The dollar supply. You'll see in the last 10 years, more than 5 times the money they have printed, what they have printed in the past 100 years, right? But what is happening is India, China, they are all taking these US dollars as a foreign reserve. The moment these people stop doing it, the US dollar will start losing value, right? Why not have a common system of currency across the world? The third most important point, what Bitcoin does is, see, normally in a physical realm, if you have a 10 rupee note, right? I give it to Kunal. I cannot give the same 10 rupee note to another person, right? Only way to do it is create a counterfeit note, create a duplicate. And the 10 rupee note, people will be able to find, okay, this is duplicate because it doesn't have the texture or some design is there that will make counterfeit note easily possible. But in a digital world, what is stopping me from creating a copy, right? A MP3 file, I can create 1,000 replicas bit by bit, which is exactly the same, right? How do you find which is original, which is duplicate? So that is the reason why we always needed a physical a third party, which is called a trusted third party, right? For all these transactions, right? You have a bank, you have a central bank like Reserve Bank of India, someone or the other who will be in the middle to validate all the transactions. So they will reduce money in one of the accounts and credit money in another account, right? So you always need a trusted third party for processing digital transaction. If I have a 10 rupee note, I don't need anyone. I can directly go to a retailer and buy something. But here I needed a system, right? It could be UPI, NEFT, IMPS, right? Or a Paytm money, wallet, all those things, a credit card, debit card, or each of this is owned by someone, right? It's not just money. Money works on another layer, right? But in Bitcoin, you are removing this third party. So in internet, people talk about this concept called disintermediation, right? You remove agriculture, people keep talking, right? Farmer does so much hard work, but he gets paid peanuts. All the money is taken by the middleman. So wherever there is middleman, if you are able to remove it, two things happen, right? The latency is removed, right? If I'm sending a letter 50 years back to my cousin in US, what used to happen? My letter used to go from my local post office to the head post office. From there, it goes to say Bombay post office. From there, it will go to London. From there, all the posts to America, it will go to America's head post office, then to the state, then to this thing, right? If you look at imagine like 20, even 10 years back, check also used to work in a similar function. You used to have an outstation check and you'll have a check that is like domestic, right? So all those things, right? So it's created so much inefficiency, right? Even right now, if you send money from here to US, it doesn't happen instantly, right? Only certain people allow it. Most of the times, all the large transactions, it takes 1 day or 2 days. Why is it so? The communication happens instantly. Like a lot of these people who are attending this webinar, someone will be attending from US. When communication can be instant, why is the settlement not instant? Right? Bitcoin removes all these middlemen so that we can directly transact. Why do I need someone watching all these transactions or allowing some such transactions or charging a transaction fee? Why do we need a gatekeeper? We love roads that don't have tolls, right? Right? We would love to travel on a highway where there is no toll. So similarly, Bitcoin is creating this kind of infrastructure where transaction can happen seamlessly. Right? So this is what I said. So in a traditional system, banks maintain balances, right? How much is Kunal having? How much is Ram having? How much is Ravi having? How much is Ramesh having? And when someone sends money, they debit that person's account and then credit the receiver's account, right? In cryptocurrency, what is happening is this ledger, not just one person, 10,000 people across the world, they'll keep this ledger. Who is owning how much in which account? Even right now, you can Google 100 richest Bitcoin addresses. You can see which address, how much Bitcoin is being owned. This is like an open database. Anyone can go and download this, right? So when a transaction happens, all the databases across the world, they all update it, right? The Bitcoin node, everyone will have a synchronization mechanism and they'll all update their ledger, right? So instead of having one centralized ledger, we have a distributed ledger. So that's why this concept of cryptocurrency is also called distributed ledger technology, DLT. Right? Typically, this is how a Bitcoin is being sent. So for example, Rob wants to send 0.5 Bitcoin to Laura. Okay. So what first Rob has to do is he opens his Bitcoin wallet. Right? He needs some address. Right? I'll also demonstrate this. So this is a website. This is the open source website. There are like countless methods to create a Bitcoin address. This is one of the addresses which I can easily demonstrate. For demonstration purpose, I'm using this website. Okay. So here what is happening is using my mouse strokes, right? Wherever I'm using mouse, taking that as an input, using this random value, it's trying to create a Bitcoin address.
Arjun, are you showing a web address to us?
Wait, just give me a second.
I can see the presentation.
So you cannot stop the, you cannot see this?
I cannot see the web page.
Okay, just give me a second. I will.
I think you just reshare the screen and it will work.
Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
basically, I'll do this again. So I'm moving this mouse. Based on this mouse movements, it is taking that as an input. This is an open source algorithm, right? Basically, you and me, we should not create the same Bitcoin address, right? So it uses this random keystrokes to generate a random number based on which it generates a Bitcoin address. So you can see this 63, 64, 67%, right? So it is like basically how many times you have to move this mouse. So you have like 90%, I have moved 95, 97, 98. So now it takes this input and creates this address. So this is how a Bitcoin address looks like. 1, 2, this thing. Some addresses will start with 3, some addresses will start with B. There are types of Bitcoin addresses, right? It's beyond the scope of this presentation, but this is how typically a Bitcoin address will look like, right? And this is the password. So if anyone sends Bitcoin to this particular address, right? For example, this is Laura's, this is my address, and I say, participants, if you like this presentation, send me 0.1 BTC or 0.001 BTC, right? You'll all be sending Bitcoins to this particular address, right? I need to keep the secret key safe. This is the key which I can use to unlock this address, right? If I have to spend, right? For example, someone is ready to buy one Bitcoin at 23 lakhs, 24 lakhs. I'm going to sell it. If I have to sell, I need to transfer the Bitcoin, right? To transfer the Bitcoin, I need this key. This key, I keep it as this thing. This is basically like a password, right? This password protects this particular address. Okay, so, okay. Going by the presentation. So Lara will be giving this address like this. Okay, so I'm going to send some amount of Bitcoins to this particular address. So what I'll do, I'll put this address. I'll say how much amount of Bitcoin I need to send, right? I'll also choose a fee. If I want to send it very fast, I put a higher fee. If I want to send it slowly, this is not going to be immediate. Even after 2 days, if it reaches to Lara, I don't mind. I put a very low fee, and then I send. What I mean by send is I put my password, right? And put a digital signature using that password so that anyone can verify, okay, the owner of this particular address where I have Bitcoins, yes, authorize this transaction, right? So the wallet will put this private key and use it to sign it, right? And it is broadcasted. So all the Bitcoin transactions that are broadcasted, it will go to something called a mempool. Okay, this is one of the visual representations of a mempool. You can say all the unprocessed transactions at the last 1 hour, 10,000 people would have sent some transactions, right? All the transactions go into something called a mempool. This is the visual representation. At 2 hours back, there are around, okay, I have to miscount. Okay, so today morning 6 o'clock, we had around 16,000 transactions. You can see the total at the bottom, right? We had 16,000 transactions. Left the 2,000 plus 1,700 plus, these are the fee, right? So they are 200 Satoshis per byte and all those things, slightly complicated. Like here in Bitcoin, you pay fee based on the size of the transaction, right? It doesn't matter what is the amount, it matters the size. So size will vary based on like how many addresses you are taking the Bitcoin from, how many addresses you are sending to, and all those things, right? So per one byte of address, how much fee I am going to keep. So that is this thing. So if you see all this yellow color, these people are paying very high fee. The green color paying moderate fee. This blue color, they are also paying a slightly below average fee. These people are paying low fee. So someone who paid a low fee here, he had to wait for like 2 hours for the transaction to get processed. Someone who paid a very high fee, it got processed in like next 10 minutes. You see, sorry. So here 655, these transactions were there. You can see that 657 in next 2 minutes, all these transactions got cleared, right? And then 7 o'clock, they got some more transactions that got cleared, right? So every peak and this thing, there's like some of the transaction got processed. You can understand. So we are paying a very low fee. You have to wait for 2 hours for it to get processed, right? This is how typically something works, right? So they go send it to the mempool, right? Then there are people called miners. Okay, the job of this miner, they have to solve a difficult, they'll take 1,000 transactions. You saw this mempool, right? They'll take top, at this point of time, there are around 16,000 transactions. They'll take top 1,000 transactions. You see that up to 60 plus, you have like 1,000 transactions. I'll take all the transactions of above this fee, right? Then I have to solve a mathematical puzzle. Across the world, everyone will be trying to solve this puzzle. So each of them will have different transactions, right? Someone will take this 1,000 transactions, someone will take some other 1,000 transactions. They all try to solve this puzzle. Whoever solves this first, right? I'll show you how this works. Okay, so whoever solves this puzzle first, he will make an announcement. Okay. Okay, so this is how these are all. This each of this number is a block. So far in the last 10 years, 6,90,586 blocks have been created. Each block you can think as a page. Each of this block will have like some transaction. You can see here. This block has 156 transactions. This block has 364. This block has 1,700. This block has 2,300 transactions, right? So if you open a block, you'll have this something like an hash. So this is his mathematical problem. He will change this one thing called nonce. Okay, this is called nonce, right? He'll keep on changing this number till he gets a block hash that starts with so many zeros. Right? I think there'll be around 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I think 18 or 19 zeros are there. So they have to keep changing this value till they get 19 zeros. So whoever announces this, that they have created a block, right? They'll get verified. So if you see, these are the 156 transactions in this block, right? So this guy has sent so and so Bitcoin to this particular address, right? He has paid so much fee, 0.0008 fee he has sent. Okay, so this guy is sending 0.08 Bitcoins. He's dividing between these two addresses. He's sending 0.005 Bitcoins to this address. He's sending 0.08 Bitcoins to this address. He's paying this fee, right? So all this fee goes to the miner who is processing this transaction. If you see, he has put all this fee. This is his address, right? He's paying it to himself. Apart from all this fee, whenever a miner creates a block, he'll also pay something to himself. This is how a new Bitcoin is created. So in 2010, right? So if I go to this block 1, okay, this is the first ever block that was mined. Okay, so he will pay himself 50 Bitcoins. You see, there's no transaction. There's just a Coinbase transaction where he's paying himself 50 Bitcoins, right? If you look at 2. Okay, again, he is also paying just to himself. So in 2010, 2011, there was hardly any transactions. Bitcoin network just got started, right? So you can see the date of this. Okay, so 9/1/2009. Okay, so that's when they started mining. Okay, you will see that block hash only had like so many zeros. It was so easy to find something with 8 zeros. Now you need to find something with 19 zeros to start off with, right? So people then they started mining. If you go to some random number like 1347, okay, you will see that there are, so even here like one guy was only mining. So you see here, like more people started sending transactions here. So this is in 2011. So here you have 17 transactions in this block, right? People are paying different, like they are not even paying any fee because there was no traffic. Some people were paying fee, some people are not paying fee, right? But at this point of time also, the block reward was 50 Bitcoins. So the miner was getting paid 50 Bitcoins. So after 4 years, what happened was, right, if I go to, let's say, 2,15,000. This block reward becomes half. After every 2,10,000, the block reward becomes half. So now you see the block reward is 25 Bitcoins. So whenever miner finds a block, he can get himself paid 25 Bitcoins along with this fee. 25 is coming from the block reward and rest 0.119 is coming from the transaction fee of all these transactions. If you go to 4,20,000, okay, so after 4,20,000, you'll see the block reward became 12.5 Bitcoins. Okay, the block reward is 12.5 Bitcoin. So whenever miner found something, he got paid 12.5 Bitcoins. Then this became 6.25 Bitcoins. Currently, from May 2020, right? So if we go to, if you see the current block size, you'll see that miners are getting paid 6.25 Bitcoins. Right? So this is how Bitcoin supply is slowly, new Bitcoin supply is slowly reducing and the overall supply is created. Right? If you go back here, so what is happening is like miner has solved a block, right? He has included that particular transaction which I sent. Right? Now, when Laura opens her wallet, she will see that Bitcoin is there in her wallet. Right? You can randomly put any address. Right? I will show you the richest Bitcoin addresses. Right, if you go to this website, you'll see top 100 Bitcoin addresses. So Bitcoin is an open network. Anyone can see how much Bitcoins are there in any address. This particular address, right? It is having 300,000 BTC. The worth is around $10 billion. Okay, so $10 billion of Bitcoin is just there in this one particular address. This particular address has $5 billion worth of Bitcoin, right? So similarly, whichever address I send to, for Laura's address, if I put it here, I will be able to find how much Bitcoin is there. So Laura can also verify whether she has received the Bitcoins or not. Right. So we have spoken, right? So why there's so much hype in the last few years is more and more people are seeing this technology and they are able to understand the power of this technology. See, what Bitcoin created is something called a digital scarcity. In digital, there is no scarcity. If I have one file to make it 1,000 copies, I don't have to spend 1 rupee, right? That is the reason you find all the pirated movies, pirated songs across internet. No one has to put any effort to create a copy of something, right? But you cannot create a copy of Bitcoin. I have one Bitcoin, which is 25 lakh rupees. If I create a copy of Bitcoin, I become 50 lakh rupees worth. Then if I copy 4 more copies, I became 1 crore. But people are not able to replicate this, right? That is where the concept is. right? They are able to create a scarcity in digital, and that is the fundamentals of Bitcoin. So more and more people are able to see the potential. After 10 years, these are the people who are accepting Bitcoin. PayPal, they have started accepting Bitcoin, right? You can send and receive Bitcoins through PayPal network. MicroStrategy is one of the biggest supporters. They have bought $1 billion worth of Bitcoin from their corporate. This is a company which is a listed company in US. They have bought a lot of Bitcoins. Square, this is a company run by Jack Dorsey, the same guy who founded and runs Twitter, right? They again support Bitcoin, right? The last guy, Elon Musk, he used to talk a lot about Bitcoin 6 months back. Then he started supporting Dogecoin, right? Now he's again supporting Bitcoin. He goes flips and flop. But more Bitcoin has what to say, caught the attention of a lot of people now, right? A lot of banks, right? A lot of banks like JP Morgan, BlackRock, Citi, Deutsche Bank, they've all started having trading desks that deal with Bitcoin because of the sudden interest by institutional investors and really wealthy individuals, right? Why this is happening, right? I spoke, right, why the value of gold is based on the supply, and this is how gold supply has changed over the years. What is happening is, as we progress, the price of gold keeps on increasing, the technology also keeps on increasing, so we are able to spend more money to extract gold, right? So today one kg of gold is around 45 lakh rupees. So people are putting so much more effort to extract gold. So people have gone like 1,000 meters in Kolar gold fields and all, right? And the technology is also getting better, so they are able to extract more and more gold. So throughout the civilization, like last 2,000 years also, the supply of gold has consistently increased because of better and better way to mine gold, right? If you look at Bitcoin, as I said, the first 3 years 50% of the Bitcoin got produced, right? Out of the 21 million, right, in first 3 years only 50% got produced. Another 25% got produced in the next uh, 4 years, right? Another 12.5% got produced till 2020. So by 2020 May, already 87.5% of total Bitcoin that could exist have got already produced, right? And in the next, by 2024, you'll have another 6%. 95% of the Bitcoin will be produced, right? The amount of new Bitcoin is being produced keeps on becoming half and half and half, right? So this is the reason why the Bitcoin price is increasing, right? The supply is reducing drastically, unlike gold, right? So normally in economics, there's this concept called price elasticity, right? What is happening with oil, right? When oil went to $140, a lot of people found newer ways to make oil, right? You can Google like shale oil, right? Fractional distillation, fricking, and all those things, right? People started finding ways to create more and more oil. So that is the reason the oil supply suddenly increased in the last 10 years, because the price was so high. So when the demand increases, right, the supply also keeps. Let's assume like suddenly people realize cashew nuts cures cancer and it's very, very healthy. Everyone will start buying cashew nuts. The cashew nut price will skyrocket from 1,000 rupees a kg, it might go to 10,000 rupees a kg. So what will happen is, because of this sudden increase in demand, lot of people will start growing cashew nuts, right? It will also increase the supply. But Bitcoin is inelastic. Even if the price suddenly becomes from 25 lakhs to 25 crores, you cannot increase the Bitcoin supply, right? When you have like a immovable object, right, the supply is going to be constant, right? It's not going to adjust with the demand. The price is going to increase dramatically. So that's what they're saying. Like the supply is entirely unaffected by the increased demand, right? So if also you have to think about this, right? Why is gold so valuable? Don't think jewelry, right? Less than 1% of the less than 10% of the jewelry is used for gold. Another 1% is used for industrial applications. 90% of the gold, even the gold for jewelry, it just sits idle in a bank locker or a vault, right? Fort Knox in US, we have seen in all movies. They hold a large amount of gold. This could be anything else. It could be platinum, it could be rhodium, doesn't have to be gold, right? We have just chosen gold to be the most precious metal, and because it's rare, it has, what to say, maintained its value, and that's like that. Right? Bitcoin has all these features of gold. It's scarce, it's divisible, it's fungible, right? So if we can replace all the gold by Bitcoin, what should be the value of Bitcoin? This is a question some people are asking, right? For that, Bitcoin price has to become $535,000. Like $500,000 will be the worth of one Bitcoin if gold is exactly replaced by Bitcoin. And this need not happen. And this is one of the use cases. People are saying gold is very difficult to transport, right? The reason why we are having US dollar as a currency for trade and not gold is because for every time we are importing oil, we are going to send gold to Saudi Arabia, and they are going to take gold and send it to US to purchase arms. It's going to be very cumbersome, right? You cannot send gold digitally. That is where Bitcoin comes into picture, right? It's much more easier to send Bitcoin via wire. So if Bitcoin becomes the standard of world trade, right, and it also becomes standard of store of value, right? Instead of gold, people started storing money in Bitcoin. Right? At that point in time, it can truly replace gold, but there's a lot of if, right? This is one of the use cases. The second use case is, what if Bitcoin can replace US dollar and people start using that to maintain the foreign reserves for trade, and even the entire economy start running on Bitcoin? What should be the value? Right? So all these lot of questions are being asked, and this is a very early stage. Bitcoin is just 10-year-old technology, right? Internet was created in 1969, and it took like 40 years for it to become mainstream, right? It took 40 years before people could order a food online, or a cab, book a taxi, or watch a 4K video, right? You had YouTube even in 2006, but you had like limited resolution, right? You didn't have the bandwidth to support it. So Bitcoin is very early. So what is possible with Bitcoin, what is not possible, it's going to take time to understand, right? If we go deep, right? I also talk about how governments are printing unlimited amount of money, right? There have been cases in Zimbabwe, in Venezuela, right, where government has printed so much amount of money, right, that they have to create $1 billion note, $1 trillion note, right? If you Google, right, Zimbabwe $1 trillion note, right, you'll see this. Just try to count the number of zeros here, right? It's 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0. They have to print so much amount of note. So people used to, even for buying their groceries, they used to carry so much amount of money, right? So in Venezuela, if you see, the money is so worthless, so they make bags with it, right? So these are like fancy bags made with dollar bills, right? So this is what has happened when government prints unlimited amount of money, right? More or less, like a lot of countries, they end up doing this. The only way to stop this is government has to limit the amount of money they will print. Government has to be disciplined, right? You read news, but we don't understand, right? What is fiscal discipline? What is the debt to GDP ratio, right? But governments, they don't care. Like every 5 years, new government comes, it's become new government's problem, right? They just keep borrowing beyond their means. And at some point of time, for some countries, it becomes uncontrollable. You get like one crazy guy, and he just says, let's print $100 billion, $1 trillion out of thin air, right? Worth of like local currency. And suddenly situation becomes like this. Right? So there, Bitcoin gives us stability. Either you have money in the form of gold or in Bitcoin or some other asset that is not affected by inflation, then you will have a proper store of value. So in all these countries, in countries like Cyprus, when there mining crisis became a huge thing, in Zimbabwe or in Venezuela, Bitcoin is like a very, say, for example, you are worth 1 million, you are, what to say, you have 50 lakhs as your net worth, right? Suddenly your government is acting crazy and they start printing unlimited amount of money, or doing all sort of crazy things, or there's a civil war, right? How do you protect your wealth? You can protect your wealth by moving to this digital. So in some of these countries where you have like communists or this kind of dictators, people are moving their wealth to Bitcoin to safeguard their money, right? So it's a very efficient. In World War II, people used to keep gold. A lot of Jews, they saved their heirloom, they saved their wealth by buying gold and hiding it in places, right? So similarly, in the modern times, people have moved to digital, where they are starting moving their money to Bitcoins, right? The halving event I spoke about, right? So the halving event happened in 2013, the halving event happened in 2017, and the halving event happened in May 2020, right? This is slightly dated, this thing. So whenever a halving event happens, the supply of Bitcoin becomes half. Suddenly the price of Bitcoin starts shooting up. In 2015, the price of Bitcoin was around 20,000 rupees. In 2017, the price of Bitcoin became 13 lakh rupees. Then it again went to 2 lakh, right? Then it touched the same thing. I think in October or September 2020, it again touched 13 lakhs, right? It went to 50 lakhs. It went to 50 lakhs in May 2020. Now again it's in 25 lakhs, right? The price, because there's so much price discovery, there are so many possibilities. It's in the early stage, right? You look, some of your parents or some of the people here, they will invest in share market and they understand when you have a small cap, the price, there's a huge volatility. In the mid cap, there's slightly less volatility. In the large cap like Infosys, the volatility is much less, right? If a company is existing for like 20 years, 30 years, you more or less know what they are capable of, and their financials are more or less fixed, right? How much revenue they are going to generate this quarter, next quarter, we kind of have a fair idea, right? But in the early stage, there's so many things possible. A company like Uber, 10 years back it was worth zero. Today it's worth uh, like what, $50 billion, right? Facebook 2003 didn't exist, 2004 it started, and today it's worth almost $1 trillion, right? So many things are possible. The same time, MySpace or Hi-Fi, they became zero now, right? Orkut, Nokia, Kodak, can talk about so many companies that also went bust, right? Why are we talking only about countries that became huge thing? So in a disruptive world, so many things happen so fast, right? So people are trying to understand what it's truly capable of. So there's so much of volatility. Once people have once there's more adoption of Bitcoin, it's much more democratized, right? You will start seeing what is the fair value of Bitcoin, right? But before that, of course, there are chances of Bitcoin dying, right? It's a bleeding edge technology, right? So if you're going to put some money in Bitcoin, always, and this is more of an advice to the parents and people, this is a risk you are taking. You have to be very aware, right? No matter how strong the technology is, the success depends on people adopting this technology, right? If it works out, it's going to be really great. If it doesn't work out, it could also go to zero. So you have to put only the money that you're willing to lose here, but it's a calculated bet. You are not putting blindly in something that, what to say, it's not a vaporware, right? This technology exists. People are using this technology, and brilliant minds of the world like Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk, or Mark Andreessen, a lot of people are watching for this technology, or Peter Thiel for the example, right? So that's about the price and volatility, right? Again, coming back to the previous this thing, if you compare between Bitcoin and gold, right? These are some of the qualities of what money should have, right? First thing is scarcity. As I already explained, Bitcoin is inelastic supply. Gold is limited but elastic. Suddenly, the price of gold becomes 48, instead of 48 lakhs 1 kg, it becomes, let's say, 48 crores. Suddenly, people will start mining from the seawater, right? The only reason they're stopping is high cost. But when the output is going to be so much more valuable, they'll start putting more effort, right? The same thing cannot be done for Bitcoin. It's inelastic. Second is transferable. It's easy to send Bitcoin and receive Bitcoin. Not so for gold, right? Storable, it's low cost. In 2010, if I had sent half a Bitcoin to one address, that particular Bitcoin address, it will still have the gold. It's a Bitcoin, right? You don't, if you have like 10,000, 5,000 rupees in a SBI bank account 3 years back, right? Now the value might even be negative because they put a minimum balance fee, annual maintenance fee, that fee, this fee, right? For even sending an SMS, they charge you 30 rupees per month, all those things, right? In Bitcoin, there's no such thing. If someone had sent you some small amount of Bitcoin, even 7 years back, 8 years back, that amount will still stay and you can still spend that amount, right? So storability is almost zero cost. There's no cost, except that how you have to figure out how you are going to store your passwords, what is a reliable way, whether you're going to use hardware wallet, paper wallet, or going to use an exchange, and all those things that you need to figure out. Gold, we already understand, right? Either you have to place in a locker or you need to buy a secure safe, right? It's not very easy to store gold, right? It's slightly higher cost. Decentralized. What do we mean by decentralized? Decentralized means no one particular country or a company has control over this, right? So Bitcoin is completely decentralized. It's not owned by an individual or a company, right? Anyone who wants to mine Bitcoin, they can mine Bitcoin. Anyone who wants to run a node on Bitcoin, they can do it. Anyone who wants to send or receive Bitcoin, they can do it, right? It's 100% decentralized. Even the founder, the guy who created this, Satoshi Nakamoto, he's anonymous. We don't know if he exists now or not, whether he is dead or not. He is no longer controlling the network. It's a community run network. So it's completely decentralized, right? Gold, it's completely decentralized. Yes, one country or the other country, they don't have the control over gold. But if government wants, they can make possession of gold illegal and they can confiscate all gold. This has happened in a lot of countries. It's not something that happens only in movies, right? This is definitely possible and has already happened, right? Durability, right? Gold is also very durable, right? If you take 10 kg of iron, you bury it now, after 10,000, if you take it, it will be rusted. You'll not find anything, any trace, right? Same thing with wood, right? Maybe to an extent, copper or something will withstand. But gold, it's a noble metal. It's extremely resistant to wear and tear, right? So if all those golden coins from pyramids and all those places, right? The reason why we are able to recover it is gold is extremely durable. Similarly, Bitcoin is extremely durable, right? If you have sent one Bitcoin 10 years back, that Bitcoin will still stay in the same address, right? The next part is fungibility. What do you mean by fungible? If you take diamonds, one diamond is different from another diamond. No two diamonds are of same value, right? This will have a different color, this will have a different texture, this will have a different, what to say, weightage or quality, right? Or impurities and all those things. But if you take gold, every 1 gram of gold is equal. You can replace this gold with that gold, right? You don't have a Kohinoor gold. You have a Kohinoor diamond or a Jacob's diamond, right? You don't have this thing because gold is fungible. You can use interchangeably. Bitcoin is also fungible, right? Even Indian rupee is fungible, right? 1 rupee, you can use anything interchangeably. Every rupee's value equally, right? If someone gives you 10 rupees and after 2 days they ask to return that money, you can give a different 10 rupee and they'll accept it. So this is the concept of fungibility, right? For diamond and all, it doesn't exist. Next is verifiability, right? Gold, you need to go to this jewelry shop to verify the quality of gold. Even then, they can only check the surface. How do you know whether the inside that gold bar, whether gold exists or some other metal exists? This actually happened in China. Like millions of dollars were scammed by a guy who gave gold bars, but they're not of complete gold. But Bitcoin, it's 100% verifiable, and the verification is very cheap. You have to just Google the address, right, in a Bitcoin Explorer, and you'll find your balance, right, whether you have received or not. You don't need to have a costly procedure to, or to say, find whether you have received the Bitcoin or there's a fake Bitcoin and all those things. Divisibility. Bitcoin, you can, because people, Bitcoin is 25 lakh rupees. People are afraid, how am I going to buy a Bitcoin? I cannot afford that. In gold, does everyone buy 1 kg of gold? We even buy 1 gram of gold, half a gram of gold, 2.5 grams of gold, right? Similarly, Bitcoin is also divisible, right? You can even buy 10 rupees worth of Bitcoin, 100 rupees worth of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is divisible up to 0.000001, right? You can have like 0.7 zeros and a 1, right? Totally up to 8 digits you can divide a Bitcoin into, right? The last 1 digit is called a Satoshi. Just like have rupee and paisa, we have Bitcoin and Satoshis, right? Gold, you can kind of go on dividing it, but you cannot divide as much, right? At some point in time, it becomes very difficult to make less than half a gram, right? Maybe at some point, people are saying Bitcoin need not replace gold. They can coexist, just like how gold and silver used to exist, right? So these are the misconceptions about Bitcoin, right? When people talk about Bitcoin, these are the things that they have got it wrong. First thing is intrinsic value is 0, right? As I already explained, any money, it's only because of people's belief it has value, right? Gold or silver, right? People think it's valuable. It's just like artwork. Mona Lisa, why is it so valuable? Because people believe it has money. Why is US dollar so much value? Right? Because people believe it has value. If people stop accepting US dollar, suddenly the value becomes 0. So any money is a social contract. Nature doesn't say this is money or this is money. Right? We as humans, we have a shared belief. We think something is worth so much. Right? So we are giving so much this thing. Right? We all believe staying near the seashore is going to be like pretty cool stuff, right? So the seaside properties are valued higher, right? So similarly, money is, everything is social contract. It's only our belief, right? So none of the money is backed by anything. That's why I said fiat currency. At some point, gold is not backed by anything. The value of gold comes from the philosophy. Like we all think gold is valuable, hence gold is valuable. Second thing, people talk Bitcoin is a bubble. They all talk about the tulip bubble, the South Sea bubble, .com bubble, right? The important thing about a bubble, proper bubble, right? Once it bursts, it doesn't come back. But Bitcoin, it has crashed multiple times. It has always come back stronger and made another all-time high. This is more similar to a share market where you have this bear market, bull market, bear market, bull market. You make a low, then you make a new all-time high. Right now, Nifty is on a new high. Right in March 2020, we had a huge crash. Right, the strong markets they recover. The bubbles they never recover. Right, once a bubble is broken, it's broken forever. Right. Next is Bitcoin is for criminals. So again, the Financial Task Force, the International Monetary Fund, which is responsible for monitoring all these transactions, right? They have made a clear statement that less than 1% of all cryptocurrency transactions is used for illegal purposes. If you want to measure the same thing for US dollar, about 3% of US dollar overall, the circulation, it's used for illegal purpose. So the traditional money is much more susceptible to frauds and this kind of usage by criminals than Bitcoin. The reason being, as I already explained, it's very transparent system, right? It's an auditable system. Everyone is watching this network. So if one part of this chain, like if one address is compromised, like you know that this address belongs to say Osama bin Laden, you'll know who has sent the Bitcoins to him, whom Osama bin Laden sent the Bitcoins to, and everyone will get caught, right? So criminals will avoid a network like this rather than use this network. There's like companies like Chain Analysis, Coinbase Analytics, which make their job to trace all the addresses, right, and find where Bitcoin is used for illegal purpose or not, and then the law and order they take care of the rest of the things. Right. The next thing is Bitcoin is too volatile. Right. The price is 50 lakhs in May, suddenly it's 25 lakhs. Right. It used to be 2 lakhs in 2018 December. Right. Why is it there's so much fluctuation? Right. There's so much volatility. So what is happening here is when there is a potential, you understand like this is going to create so much change, but you don't have the understanding what is the impact going to be. You know, this guy is going to be great. Right? People like at 18 years, you look at Rishabh Pant. He can be all-time great, but you're not sure. You don't want to bet your life on Rishabh Pant. So suddenly this IPL he plays extremely well. So we think, okay, this guy can be worth $10 million. Suddenly you are having doubts in the next tournament. Right? So, but as time progresses, after a few years, you know, Kohli is an all-time great. You know, Sachin is an all-time great. Right? After a period of time, if they have performed consistently, you know, okay, there's potential and is going to do stupendously well. So this is what happens, right? So when something is new, people are just testing, experimenting. People don't have a fair idea what the true value should be. So there are different people, there are market forces. Suddenly people sell, suddenly people buy. And as time progresses, right, the market capitalization will steady. Right. So if you look at internet, there's this .com bubble, right? In 1990s, people knew internet could be everything. Right? Internet is going to change the future, but they didn't know how. That is the reason they bet on everything that's on internet. Every guy, every grocery guy, they started creating their own website. There was something called a pets.com, that. Right? So then after 2000, the bubble happened and crashed. We realized, okay, certain companies like Google, Amazon, and in future Facebook, YouTube, these are going to be extremely valuable. People are going to use it. Not all websites will succeed, right? And this is true, right? Internet has succeeded beyond our dream. In 2000 or before that, the most valuable companies in the world used to be energy companies, right? Enron, British Petroleum, Chevron, Standard Oil, and all those things, right? But after 2000, the last 10 years, you see all the top 5 countries, they're all tech companies. Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, right? Or Alphabet. Right? The reason being, internet has so much potential. People knew this in 1990s, but they were not sure which is going to be so valuable. Right? Look at the share price of Amazon, for example. Right? So this has happened in Telegraph. You can take Google Telegraph bubble. Right? People knew Telegraph is so valuable, they put Telegraph everywhere. There was a railroad bubble. Right? People put in US, any private person can put a railway line after taking permission. Right? And they put railways everywhere. Right? When people know there's going to be potential, a lot of people do a rush. There's a gold rush. Suddenly there's so much price increase. Then rationalization happens. The price decreases. Then you see this thing. So everything goes through an S curve, right? And the next is Bitcoin is too expensive. I already explained. You don't have to buy one whole Bitcoin. You can even start with 10 rupees or 100 rupees. Right? So far I spoke about Bitcoin, right? Then people realized Okay, if so much can be done to money, why can't I do the same thing to the rest of the internet? Right? That's how Ethereum came into picture. Ethereum is like a decentralized Play Store. You can create an app and start running on Ethereum instead of Play Store, and then no one controls it. It runs on its own. Right? For example, all these rummy games, right? They're all pre-built, or even the chess game, right? You can create a software and run it on Ethereum, and it will run on its own. You don't have to go and what to say, start, stop, change the algorithm or anything. It will keep on be running. So now Ethereum is like the second largest coin in terms of market capitalization, right? And they're going through an upgrade. It's a very exciting technology, right? It wants to be the computer of the world, internet computer, right? Then there are other coins like Tether, Uniswap. If you Google, you'll be able to find about all these coins. This is a very interesting token, basic attention token, right? All these companies like Google, Facebook, they are powered by ad revenue, right? I spend so much time on internet every day. I spend 10 hours, right? I don't earn anything out of it. Google and Facebook earn, right? Why should it be so, right? So, and what they created is they created a browser called Brave Internet Browser, right? Which is very similar to Chrome in terms of all functionalities. If you use that browser, you can choose to turn off all ads. And when you choose to turn on the ads, it says that you will get paid. The publisher who is showing the ad, he pays your account directly, right? There is no middleman, right? If Nestle want to show some ad to you, they will be paying you in terms of BAT token, right? And in your wallet, every time you see an ad, you'll get these credits, right? So there's a lot of interesting technology, because like decentralization, removing middlemen is the most important thing, right? Last 5 years, we talk a lot about Facebook is owning all your data, Google is owning all your data, right? This is all happening because of the centralization risk. If you take Google out of the picture, Amazon out of the picture, why should there be an Amazon? I am buying some stuff from someone, right? Why can't we both do it directly? Why do we need a middleman like Amazon? Let's say I'll buy books directly from, say, Tata McGraw-Hill, and I'll choose a logistic provider. It could be Amazon, it could be Blue Dart, it could be Professional Courier, right? And I'll get the things delivered. I don't need a middleman like Amazon sitting in the middle doing all these activities. So look at Make My Trip. Why do I need a Make My Trip to book my flight tickets? Why can't I do directly with this company? Right? Decentralization, blockchain, right? You can remove away a lot of these centralized entities, right? When we talk about investing in cryptocurrencies, you have like three basic risks. One is a speculative risk. Already explained, this is a very infancy technology, bleeding edge technology. It can go to 0 or it can go 100x. There's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of volatility. So always put only amount you can lose, and also stagger your investments, right? Split your investments into multiple things, do something like an SIP. Invest regularly rather than doing a one-time bulk investment, right? Next is the security risk. If you're going to store it, you are going to store it properly. You have to keep the password careful. You need to have an antivirus software in your system, right? You don't do the mistakes that normal people do, right? Because you're storing a digital money. So you need to be really, really careful. Even the exchanges which store Bitcoin, they need to do all these things and be extremely safe so that they don't get hacked and the Bitcoin is moved from there. Third is the regulatory risk, right? What happens to governments? Governments think the role of money is also part of their job. It was not always this case, right? 500 years back, 600 years back, we were using a decentralized currency called gold, right? Government had no clue how much gold to produce or this thing. They had mining systems, but people just had gold that was running, and government was not controlling the supply and demand, right? So now, last 200 years, government has assumed this job, like, of regulating the supply of money in this thing. How they are going to take this? So far, a lot of countries, right, like Japan, Australia, European Union, Singapore, they have all taken a favorable this thing, right? They have all regulated cryptocurrencies. If you read the news last month, El Salvador, a country, has made Bitcoin their national legal tender, right? It's just as good as their own currency. So more and more countries are regulating Bitcoin, right? So if you are looking to buy Bitcoin, you can buy it in our website, Geotes, right? So I think I'm done here, right? So there are a lot of questions. I think I can go to the questions now.
So that was a lot of information, a lot of new information for me. Thank you, Arjun. I think we can take some questions now. If anyone wants to ask a question, can you use your raise hand wala option which you have on your thing, so I can unmute you?
So I'll also be answering the questions here mentioned in the chat. Like Pooja has asked, who decides how much more Bitcoin can be created? So it's all, so there's a Bitcoin white paper you can Google, right? You Google Bitcoin white paper, you'll see a 7-page document. You can see Satoshi Nakamoto has clearly defined how Bitcoin should work. And all the supply, all those things were decided in 2010. And this mathematically agreed this thing. Every 4 years, the new Bitcoin's issuance should be half, right? That is how this 21 million Bitcoins we are arriving at, right? So it's already pre-decided and it's limited to that. So also the creator no longer has any power. He's an anonymous guy, right? So today I go to internet and say, I am the Satoshi Nakamoto. I created those Bitcoins. No one will believe it. Even if they believe it, I can prove it with all the private keys and everything. Why should I listen to you? Why should Bitcoin network listen to me? Right? It is like a decentralized network. It has taken its own this thing. This is like the, let's say Nehru and Gandhi, they got freedom for us, right? They come here, they still have to stand in the elections, right? They have to do things that we want to understand, right? We think 21 million is a fair level, right? Even if these people go on, or like say they want to change country into certain direction, we will not believe them, right? We will want to do it what is best for the country. So similarly, here also, even the creator comes back, as long as the overall community, they think it's better for this coin to increase the supply, it need not happen.
Okay, we can take a question from Ranjit. Ranjit, are you on?
Yeah.
You unmuted yourself?
Hi,
Okay.
it was a very nice session. Is it legal in India? Is there any restrictions investing from India?
It's completely legal in India. So we run our exchange in India. So with respect to technology and regulations, you always see that first the technology comes, then the regulation comes, right? Just because it's unregulated doesn't mean it's illegal. So this has been clarified by the Ministry of Finance. It has been clarified by Reserve Bank of India that Bitcoin is legal in India. There are no restrictions in trading or possession. If you're making profits, you have to pay your tax. Apart from that, there are no restrictions.
Okay, let's take a question from Anushka now. Anushka, I've asked you to unmute.
Yes, sir. Can we encash Bitcoin immediately?
So there are marketplaces. That is where things like Geotas come into picture, right? What we have tried to create is a marketplace. We are like an OLX. So you want to come and buy Bitcoin, right? We have created a place where you can come and put your request, right? You want to buy so-and-so Bitcoin, right? Someone is willing to sell Bitcoin, right? He'll also put your request. There's an order matching that's happening. Right? This is how all these stock markets function. Just like how you can buy a share of Infosys or Google, and you can also sell a share of Bitcoin, Google or Infosys. Same thing is here, 24/7 at any point of time, right? You can buy or sell Bitcoin. Right? You don't even need my permission. Everything is automated. You can go put your entry and it will get executed. So you can encash your Bitcoin or you can purchase a Bitcoin. Both you can do it.
Let's take a question from Mohan now.
Yeah, I had a question. How do you start mining Bitcoin?
So basically, you start, see, the key thing is like in 2010, it was very easy to mine Bitcoin. No one knew about Bitcoin. Hardly few people are mining Bitcoin. Even in a phone or system, you can mine a Bitcoin. As more and more people became aware. So right now, as I said, every 10 minutes, 6.25 Bitcoins are being produced. Right? The miner earns 6.25 Bitcoin. 6.25 into 25 lakhs, you get 1.5 crores.
1.6, yeah, 1.6.
Yeah, 1.5, 1.6 crores, right? So what will happen is people across the world put together, they spend up to 1.4, 1.5 crores to do this. So if you Google Bitcoin mining farms, you'll see acres and acres of facility. People have a specialized hardware, right? What hardware we have is a generalized hardware, right? You can do maths, you can do this kind, you can watch videos, you can do Excel calculation. They have created a hardware specific for mining Bitcoin. It's called application specific integrated circuit, ASIC, right? This purpose is only to mine a particular cryptocurrency, right? You can import this mining machines from China and all those things, right? That's far more, effective rather than just mining from your laptop. This is first thing, you need this hardware, right? The second thing, the most important thing you need is electricity. these mining machines, their only input is electricity, right? So they're going to shoot your electricity bills like crazy. So across the world, the mining systems are established in places where the electricity is cheap, right? People are having it near hydroelectric systems, right? If you are in Himachal or places where electricity is cheap, right, you can set up your mining rig over there. People are doing it in Texas and other places where, or Wyoming, right, where the electricity is pretty cheap. So if you have all these things in place, you have to run a software and it will do the job.
Okay. And I had one more question also. Do you see your platform Goitus giving competition to platforms like Coinbase and all, like in the future?
Absolutely right. That is the reason why anyone runs a company, right? You want to be the number one. It's a winner. Everyone wants to be number one, right?
What's
So
the approximate, what's the total valuation of Goitus currently?
see, valuation is subjective, right? If you're a listed company, there is a valuation. When you're an unlisted company, it's just private,
So
right?
like,
We can value
what
whatever we want. If I think, if you want to buy my company and I am going to say it's going to be like 500 crores, right? I can say whatever I want. It's like a piece of land, right?
Yeah.
And unless land, which is very fungible, you know that the next plot is so and so rate, so this plot has to be between this range. There's no such thing for a company because every company is unique. Their advantages are unique. The team that's handling is unique, right? So when an investor comes into picture, the value is what we both agree, right? So you can say 300, 400 crores, right? And the next part is, if you look at internet, it's a very disruptive place. In 2003, 2004, you thought Orkut is going to be the social media of the world. Then you thought MySpace. Suddenly Facebook came out of nowhere, and today we are all using Facebook, right?
I
So
think it was the 10th social network created in total, I think.
Okay, let's take another question now about cryptocurrencies again. I think, okay, Nilesh.
Yeah. So there are thousands of coins right now, and every day we are seeing new coins. So let's say in the future, in 10 years, 20 years time, if I want to invest in SIP, so which one would be the best to, like 10 years, 20 years time?
see, when you go to stock market, what is the advice you get? Like invest in a blue chip company, right? It's something that's more established. So cryptocurrency is an extremely risky place. So I'll say stick to the top currencies. So I'll say 60%, 70% put in Bitcoin, 20, 30% you can put in Ethereum, right? The rest 10% you can gamble, right? I'll say gamble because a lot of these coins are vaporware. They're just an idea. You don't have a working product or an application. Bitcoin has been in existence for 10 years and it's stable. People know what it does, what is the potential and all those things. A lot of the coins, they are there for like the last 2-3 years only, or some of these coins just last 1 year, right? Don't go behind the hype. If you have time, if you have this thing, you can go read the white paper, listen to the YouTube videos, what they are trying to do, and take an informed decision, right? If you don't know all these things, I'll say stick to Bitcoin or Ethereum. Even this, don't put your entire savings or life investments. Put like 10%, 20% maximum, and put it in a regular manner. Don't put it in a bulk. So even the price of Bitcoin reduces, right? If you keep on doing a dollar cost averaging, it's called DCA. If you regularly invest your money, right, you will bring down the average price, and in the long term, you can be profitable.
So basically, don't invest in the next Dogecoin. That's what you want to say.
You see, there is like a lot of people have made money in investing in Dogecoin, right? But it's like a ticking time bomb, right? You need to understand it's driven by hype, so it can come down. Right? You need to have plan B, plan C. You need to have stop loss and all those things in place. If you understand how to play this cycle, you do it. If you are like just have a very little understanding how things work, if you just run with Dogecoin, you might get hurt, right? Or you might be lucky and make money. Right? Both things can happen.
Hello.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, I'm Vikram here. So, just extending on the Dogecoin, you see Elon Musk manipulating the entire, not just Dogecoin, even the Bitcoin market just by his tweets. He has so much power. So, I mean, what is the fundamental? How do you really determine, like in share market, there are various things how you can determine which shares to invest in. In all alternate cryptocurrencies, is there any fundamentals which we can use in trying to find the next good alternate cryptocurrency?
Sure. See, first thing is you have to identify the application, right? See what the coins are for. Bitcoin is trying to be a currency, right? If merchants like Tesla, they are already started accepting cryptocurrency, right? If some more people, they are starting to accept cryptocurrency, or if you look at the world's largest hedge funds, BlackRock and all those people, how much money they are putting, right? So if you look at these people are investing some money in Bitcoin, this is going to be like a proof of approval, right? So more and more people will start doing it. Now El Salvador making it a sovereign currency. If another large country, they do it, it's going to be really like a seal of approval. If you take Ethereum, Ethereum is a platform. There are Ethereum killers, right? How you have iPhone killers. A lot of people want to be the future of Ethereum, right? You have EOS, you have Tron, right? You have Waves. There are so many other platforms, right? There's Polkadot. So you need to see how many applications are in Ethereum, how many applications are in this thing, which is growing faster, right? So based on that, you can make this decision. There is a coin called Uniswap, which is basically a decentralized exchange. So you can compare that with other decentralized exchange. There's 1inch, there is KyberSwap, right? So how are these people doing? Where the transactions are more? And if you understand technology, you can see what is the activity in GitHub, right? Where much more developments are happening. So these kind of things you can do, right? This is how fundamentals, like unlike share market here, there's no cash flow. Bitcoin doesn't generate a cash flow just like that. A proof of stake coin might, right? Ethereum is moving to something called a proof of stake. So just by holding Ethereum, you'll be generating more Ethereum in future, not right now in the next upgrade. So those kind of things, maybe cash flows come into picture, then that can create the valuation. But right now, these are some of the proxy, or say like thumb rules to value something. But most importantly, it's all driven by hype, right? Just like a land price. If a metro is going to come near your place, even there's a rumor, the price suddenly increases, right? Then the government confirms actually, yes, it's coming or not coming. Based on that, the price kind of becomes stable, right? So in the initial stage, people can move markets heavily, right? This happens even in this thing, right? If Rakesh Jhunjhunwala invests in a certain stock, suddenly a lot of people run behind and buy that stock, then the stock hits an upper circuit, right? So in crypto, Elon Musk purchases the seal of approval, the world's richest man. He is thinking about looking at crypto. So a lot of people think, okay, there must be some stuff. People are too lazy to do the research. What is Dogecoin capable of? How many transactions it can do? Why is it better or worse than Bitcoin? The Dogecoin supporter himself, he says he cannot be compared to Bitcoin, right? Dogecoin was created under 4 hours or something. It was just a hobby, side project, right? So you have to do your research, basically. If you cannot do the research, just stick to top 2, top 3 coins, right? You can just invest in Binance Coin, Polkadot a little bit, and put your majority in Bitcoin and Ethereum. Not a financial advice.
Yeah, hi, this is KK Thapa. Can I ask the question?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is like recently I have read that recently I have read that even the governments all over the world they are going digital, in the sense that they are going for the central bank digital currencies. CBDC. So do you think this Bitcoin and all, they will be in direct competition with those CBDC, or like it will come under the CBDC, like central bank digital currency, and they will be having a lot of such Bitcoins? Like, and one more question, like 60% of the miners, 60% of the miners, people say they are from China. So that itself is creating some doubt in the mind of the people, like, okay, how far this is sustainable? And yeah, and one more thing, one more question.
This one by one.
Let's do one question after.
Otherwise, forget the question, then you'll have to again repeat it, right? The second question, right? So 70-80% of the phones are manufactured in China, laptops are manufactured in China. You take anything, even the drugs, right? The API, the key ingredient of a lot of pharma drugs, they are all manufactured out of China, right? So it's just this thing. They are a huge manufacturing powerhouse. They are producing the hardware, right? Electronics required for mining. So naturally, we will also see 60% of the mining power coming from China. But recently, China is cracking down on miners. So a lot of miners are shifting to other places like US and Europe and stuff like that, or Kazakhstan. So this 60% is reducing a lot, right? And what was CBDCs, right? So the first question you asked about, what is the role of CBDCs? So first of all, this is predicting the future. It's like a very dangerous game. 10 years, 20 years back, you talk about like how internet is going to affect you. I'll say internet is going to affect your lives a lot, but I'm not sure how, right? You cannot predict a Zomato or Uber and all those things. If you could predict, you would have started those companies yourself, right? Only a handful of people were able to see that and create companies like this. Having said that, I spoke a lot about the properties of Bitcoin. Right? It's decentralized. The supply is limited. Central bank digital currency will more be like another version of UPI, right? You have a different database, different way of transferring money, but maybe you don't need a bank. You'll be holding an account directly with RBI. Instead of running on an Oracle database, it will run on a blockchain database, right? But the supply and all those issues that I spoke about, inflation and all those things, that are not going to be solved, right? So maybe Bitcoin can coexist with these CBDCs, or maybe, as I said, there's a small chance Bitcoin can become zero also. The CBDC become everything, right? Also, look at this. You look at your Play Store. Do you have one app that does all the work? No, right? You find a different app for doing different things. So CBDCs cannot be solving all the problems or all the applications of internet, right? You need certain things for certain stuff. For microtransactions, what do you mean by microtransactions? For example, you are driving a driverless car. I mean, sorry, you are riding in a driverless car, right? So this car can do micropayments to the traffic signal, right? To give it more priority, it can pay 10 paisa, right? So a lot of in digital world, you will start paying in per second, right? The movie, I don't like it. So after watching 10 minutes, I'm going to pay 10 paisa and say, okay, I don't want to watch this movie. I watch something else. You'll start paying per page. If you have a wallet associated with the browser, right? Why do you have to buy a whole book, right? You will start paying, you like 100 pages, you read 100 pages and you pay for that. You will start paying per article in the New York Times rather than doing a 1 month subscription, right? When you have things like these, you need micropayments. Whether CBDC can support this kind of huge load is going to be a question. Already, the National Payments Corporation, they are saying UPI is creating a huge load on the network. It's crashing the bank servers. So many people are using UPI and they're not able to support it, right? So how are you going to fine tune the CBDC? Whether to support a lot of small transactions or only large transactions? A lot of design decisions need to take place. But in a cryptocurrency world, it's a competitive environment. So people are creating Bitcoin for large transactions. Things like Stellar, Ripple, they exist for microtransactions, right? Ethereum is there as a platform, right? You have things like Uniswap that are a decentralized exchange. So it's a interesting question. This is something we'll have answer in maybe 5 years, 10 years, or even 30 years, right? Things can coexist or one will win over the other. So there's no clear answer. Hopefully I'm bullish on Bitcoin. That is the reason I'm in this business, running an exchange. We are invested our life in Bitcoin because we think there is a use case here.
Sir, one more thing. There is like economical divide ke saath, there is a very big digital gap in India. And for that matter, I think it exists everywhere in the world. So like it will like digital haves and digital have-nots sort of situation. It will further divide the society.
See, this is the fundamental underlying layer, right? No one uses, you look at all the computers in 20 years back, 30 years back, right? People used to only work on the terminal with only commands. There's no graphical user interface. There's no mouse. There's no click, right? Everything has to be a command, right? Now you have a operating system on top of that, right? Which lets you do a lot of things without understanding what is happening beyond this, right? Look at the adoption of UPI, right? So this is not going to replace everything. First, it will coexist. At some point in time, it can replace, and even at that point of time, even a biometric authentication might be possible. You'll have layers that will run above this Bitcoin network that will make it accessible to more people. Things that will be successful, you will see more adoption, right? So, like this is what is happening, right? This is going to happen. It's basically how people adapt, right? No one can stop an idea whose time has come. Like 100 years before, people complained, right? What is going to happen to human labor when machines are going to do all the textile weaving and everything, right? People have moved beyond weaving, right? We have so many jobs that didn't exist 100 years back. The next 30 years, a lot of the current jobs will be replaced by newer jobs, right? So I think people will adapt.
Are there any more questions? I don't see any raised hands below. Okay, we have one.
Hello.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, I have a question. Like what I understand is there are so many cryptocurrencies now in the market. And in future also, what I am understanding is a lot of blockchains who are IT people, they are creating their own cryptocurrency. So what is the authenticity? I mean, like I got to know there are already 1,300 cryptocurrencies in the market today. So in today's world, if it is 1,300, next coming years there could be 13,000. So how this is regulated, or otherwise everybody will have. Another question is that the basic idea of
let's take one by one. Let me answer this question so that otherwise I'll have to again ask you like what was your first question, right? So see,
okay, no problems.
this is a free world, right? You look at how many search engines exist. You want to create a search engine, you can go and do it. You want to create a social media, you can go ahead and do it. That's how LinkedIn came into picture. That's how Twitter came into picture. You had Snapchat, right? So in the free world, there is competition, right? So people want to create a better version of Bitcoin. They can go ahead and create it, right? There's no one stopping. Like there's like, then it becomes licensing. Before 1990, there are hardly like one model of scooter you could buy. You could just buy a scooter from Bajaj, right? You could just have two people from whom you can take a telephone connection from, or just one BSNL where you can take telephone connection from, right? Today you have like choice options, right? And whichever is better, of course, is going to win, right? The whole thing about the share market and all those things is betting on the winning guy, winning horse, right? If the cryptocurrency that you choose and invest and hold kind of captures the market, it's going to be the winner, right? So that's how things work. It doesn't make sense to stop. Like, I think this is what is going to win, and let this be the only guy who will invent this, right? If you look at flight, like hundreds of people across the world were trying to fly, and the Wright brothers, they got it right. Right? You cannot stop people from experimenting or innovating or doing an invention. So people create all types of cryptocurrencies, and some of them succeed. Yeah.
Okay. Another question I have is that the initial idea of creating a cryptocurrency was keeping it away from the banking system. Am I right?
Need not be, right? What to say?
Yeah. I mean, creating a parallel system for transactions, which is
Kind of, yes.
different from the banking system.
Kind of, yes.
Right. So, but today for buying Bitcoins, we have to invest through our like our own currency, whether it is dollar or whether it is Indian rupees or whether it is some kind of a valuable asset. So it is not making that sense. That the basic idea was that having a parallel system which will not require this kind of a banking system or the I'm not getting the right thing, but creating a different sort of an asset class, I would say.
I'll say what has happened to the trains, right? This is a very good example, right? Even when electric trains came into picture, there are still diesel trains. You'll say, why do we still have diesel trains? Then your network will be half complete. You can travel from Chennai to Bombay, but you cannot travel from Bombay to Nagpur because that network is not electrified yet, right? At any point in time, things have to coexist when the transition needs to happen, right? When everything is electrified, you will not need a diesel engine, right? When everything is this thing, you don't need this thing. So same thing here. You cannot become totally crypto world within a day one. There's going to be a place when things will coexist. The transition will happen. You look at even human evolution. You had human Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. They coexisted for a while parallelly. And then you had only Homo sapiens exist, right? The better technology kind of this thing. So just because Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin, you need banking network support and all those things for this to become accessible to more and more people. Once that happens, see, for example, another basic example. They start say we have created flights. Why do we need some trains? For a while, they'll coexist. If they are clearly superior, they're going to replace, or maybe they can continue to coexist.
Okay, we have a question from Mr. Jagdish. He has been asking what is blockchain. Can you help us with that, Arjun?
Block. Each page is a. So that I have to go to a little bit more technical. There is a hash that is showed, right? 18 zeros. It will also have the hash of the previous block, the hash of the previous block. if you change any one of the blocks, any data, everything gets tampered. Okay, so that's what you call as a blockchain, right? The scope of this question already I was like running behind this thing time. So blockchain is basically this, using this algorithm to create a chain of blocks, right? Show where I got the 1 Bitcoin from, where that person got the 1 Bitcoin from, right? The entire chain is audited every time. The reconciliation happens after each and every block is created, right? The entire chain is a history of movement of this particular Bitcoin from different parts. Corrupt or like unreadable, right? This is the fundamental of blockchain. Bitcoin is the first example of blockchain, right? Bitcoin introduced the concept of blockchain. People thought, okay, why don't I take this particular technology and use it somewhere else? That's how blockchain came into being. Before 2009, there was nothing called a blockchain or cryptocurrency. Bitcoin was the first blockchain, that was the first cryptocurrency.
Okay, so I think we have answered quite a lot of questions, Arjun. Thank you so much for all the knowledge that you have shared. And I think today we have put a basic concept of cryptocurrency in a lot of children. And I think the number of people who will use cryptocurrencies in India will start increasing by this. I think we just put a seed in someone's mind, right? And maybe it will become from 10 to 10,000 in 5-10 years.
Sure.
So thank you so much, Arjun, for all the knowledge which you have shared. And I would also like to thank everyone who have joined. And I really hope that all of you enjoyed the session. And right now, I'll just give all of you access to unmute yourself so that people can thank Arjun for that, for all of his contribution. Okay, I think now everyone can unmute themselves.
Thank you so much, Arjun. It was really an enlightening session.
It was very nice.
Thank you.
For someone who doesn't know much about cryptocurrency, you covered all the basics and did go into a little technical also. That was very nice. I would have loved for you to show on your platform how to buy a cryptocurrency. I mean, that would have been awesome. But no, I mean, I would have loved to see your platform, you know, the interface and everything.
See, actually, this is pretty much a job, right? You can reach out to me directly, LinkedIn, or you can go to geodes.com. We have a pretty good customer support. They will guide you through the entire process.
Okay.
How do you register and all those things. So,
can you send this recording to us? Can you broadcast this
Definitely,
recording?
That I think someone from the Education 10x team can answer.
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you so much for this amazing session, Arjun sir. It was really nice, and I got to learn a lot about cryptocurrency and the basics and the root level of cryptocurrency. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
And also, can you please name the platform? Can you write it down?
Geotest.com. I will just.
Can you just write it, or we'll send the link or something?
Sure.
I think everyone can contact Arjun on LinkedIn also.
So what is Arjun's contact number?
That we can't provide. But you can find, I think you can find Arjun on LinkedIn, and you can Google him. He's quite a famous guy.
What is his full name? Arjun Vijay.
Okay.
Thanks, Arjun. Although I joined late, but you were able to clarify all my doubts, and I'm sure that future is like with cryptocurrency. However, we say no to it, but somehow we have to accept that boom in future, like we have accepted digital payments and other things. So this is going to happen, but maybe in a more refined way it will happen. So thank you so much for guiding us.
Thank you.
Achha, what are the charges you take for the trading?
It's just 25 basis points. Like if you buy for like 1 lakh rupees, we charge 250 rupees. For 10,000 rupees, it's 25.
So can we pay in Bitcoins only?
anything. Whichever you buy, we take charges from that. Right? These are
And what is the system for encashment?
See, that's what this is beyond the scope, right? You can go to geotus.com. There is a chat window available, or you can even give a customer care number here. Just call, they'll guide you completely end to end. Today is Sunday, maybe they are still available till 10 p.m. but we are like thinly staffed on a Sunday. Tomorrow,
Can you please keep that number for a little bit
I'll
time?
just put it in the chat.
Yeah.
You can just go take it from there.
Okay, so I think we have discussed quite a lot about cryptocurrencies. Thank you so much, Arjun. Thank you for your time. I know it would have been really hard to take some time out of your Sunday for us, but thank you so much, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining it. I'll be ending the session now. Thank you so much.
The questions are really good. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks a lot.